Welcome to PolyCast, a civilization podcast focused on game strategy. DanQ,
Makahlua,
TheMeInTeam,
QNL,
with guest co-hosts
dacole,
Wodan.
You are so terrible!
I wrecked people.
You suck! You suck! You are like the worst person ever.
And Lisa just gave me like a really, really heartwarming compliment. I thank you for that.
It's going to be in his signature now.
Welcome everyone to PolyCast 93. This is Wodan, otherwise known as William Wible. We're also joined by Makahlua,
hello,
TheMeInTeam,
I bring the cast to LOLcast.
also Zaldar,
I see blue squiggles!
QNL,
Deep Sea Civing Fleet.
and of course our illustrious host, DanQ.
It's summertime, but not yet on the calendar. Don't tell Mother Nature.
Let's get started.
How the AI usually beats you when you lose. You play it till they actually beat you, or you figured out they beat you and so you go ahead and stop playing. Usually beats me in warfare.
I usually quit.
Yeah, that's why Conquest wasn't much higher in that poll. Because none of us are going to sit there and watch everything get burned up.
Probably the most typical ways for me to lose is one or multiple AIs are closing in on space or culture, and I can't realistically stop them without somebody else getting space or culture first instead.
Yeah, I would say the most common loss would be base race for me, just because I often have trouble keeping up on tech, and that's where it kind of bites me in the ass. And time? I don't know, I just never go that far. If it looks like I'm going to lose, then I quit before that. Usually it's pretty clear.
Ways I have lost: cultural and space race.
You've never lost by conquest?
No.
No, it's like I said earlier, we all quit out before that.
In the news, what's, new with the upcoming Civilization 5? In forum talk, needing better animals and how long will you be around playing Civ 4 after Civ 5's release? In the Senate, revisited. Do you build monasteries in Civ 4 and analyzing its imperialistic trait introduced in the Warlords expansion? In the Research Lab, exploring a deep-sea fishing fleet. And under the Miscellaneous heading, 2 other Christopher Tin songs proposed as Civilization 5's theme.
Here's what's been making news in the Civ community.
A couple other interesting news, I guess, about Civ 5 is it's been a pretty common complaint, and one that's been covered in PolyCast, that catapults and other bombardment units are overpowered. We can just kind of rush into a city with a bunch of bombardment units and you win, and it's too easy. Cities are going to have hit points now. I'm not sure exactly how this works, but apparently like cities have a certain number of hit points and you need to take it down to 0 before you can take the city. And instead of just having the units sitting inside the city, garrison in there, the units are supposed to sort of merge with the city and boost the city's hit points. So the more units you have inside of a city, the more hit points you have. Therefore, the more units you have inside a city, the more bombardment units you may need. This is another matter also because you can't stack them anymore.
Yeah, so you can't stack them, but can you take them out of the city?
No, if you take them out of the city, then you lose the hit points.
So it's what? Once you take a unit and merge it with the city, it's now part of the city and you can't take it back out for a mobile defense?
No, you can take it out. It's just when it's in the city, they, I guess, boost the city's hit points. But when you take them out, then the corresponding hit points are gone.
Okay, that's interesting. That makes it a little harder to see, because one of the things I liked about it, there was no more hiding of your army. If someone had a huge army, you would see it, because it would be spread across several hundred tiles. Now they could still have it kind of hidden inside their cities.
Another thing I've been looking at that was kind of interesting was the puppet state. It's like a puppet state in real life, sort of. When you take over a city, you can use its research and gold and culture, but you don't get a say in what it produces. So you basically take all the good stuff from the city, but you don't really have any choice in its production, which can be useful. I mean, a lot of times captured cities aren't really good for producing anything right after you capture them anyway. So this sounds fine.
I wonder if that's replacing vassal state, which nobody ever uses.
I think that's a choice, but I'm not completely sure.
It can be annoying, too. Especially peace vassals. God, I hate peace vassals so much.
I usually turn actually vassal states off. They seem to, and I haven't heard it for wonders yet, but on their website they do talk about that you are actually going to have actual kind of moving animations of when you are dealing with another Civ. So they seem to be moving back to better movies, which would be nice, since I always liked the Wonder movies, except in 4, especially in Alpha Centauri. In Alpha Centauri, the Wonder movies were very, very great.
And I always disabled those after the first couple runs through the game.
Yeah, I disable them in 4 because they're awful.
I disabled them in every incarnation of Civ I've played, which is all of them except for 1. I didn't really play a lot of Civ 1. I was too young, I guess.
It talks about here that units, this is from a Spanish site and has been translated through Google, so perhaps a grain of salt here, I don't know. The units may pass through squares occupied by friendly soldiers, but they cannot stay in the same area or join forces. So is that meaning then when it says that they cannot stay in the same area, then that means you're passing through so that you can't actually end your turn on the tile with a friendly soldier, but you can go through it? You have to see. But I think even more interesting with regards to units is a preview that seems to contradict what other previews have said. Game Reactor talking about cities not being able to host any units at all.
I can see why they would conclude that there's no units in cities, but what they say here is, gone is the old way of stacking units into cities that would fight off invading forces. Instead, cities will now have health points that must be completely depleted before being taken over. Players will still be able to put units into the cities, but this will now absorb the units into the city and boost its hit points instead of allow the unit to battle invaders. So that makes sense. I guess where they might have gotten that idea is just the units can't battle invaders, but having units in cities is definitely still a possibility.
This is Forum Talk, where we investigate hot Civ issues in the forums.
Currently in Civ 4, we have a few animals that rise up in the beginning of the game, and they include bears, wolves, panthers, lions. This guy named 6K Man proposes that we need better animals. They're pretty predictable and not at all realistic, so he proposes other animals that might actually eat humans, like sharks, crocodiles, tigers, lions, but we already have lions. He just says, oh yeah, bears don't eat humans, but sharks and tigers do. I mean, I don't know.
I think Mackie's about to explode over there.
Well, it usually just kills you rather than eats you. But yeah, bears are pretty vicious. I mean, if you piss them off, you're going to die, probably.
I think it's time for a Mackie rant. This Mackie rant brought to you by PolyCast.
Oh, I was trying to do the Jaws theme.
Oh.
I'm against animals to start with. I'm sorry. They really piss me off. The concept of a tiger or a crocodile or anything else taking out a group of people large enough to found a new city just irks me. And on top of that, they can kill organized military parties. And that's at its worst when it's animals, because that's when you have the least time to actually develop your units, your military, spawn bust. So you can have your scouting entirely screwed just because you happen to end your turn next to a bear early in the game. And at best you have like 50-50 odds against that, but usually you have a losing odds against it. And
yeah, seriously.
It can change the game very easily, and that pisses me off, because animals don't do that. Bears don't attack like 1,000 people with clubs. Bears attack one guy out there being stupid.
Maybe it's 1,000 bears. That happened all the time.
Exactly.
Yes, because bears are herd animals.
Golden Compass armored bears, exactly.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't love the sharks and crocodiles idea either. I don't really want animals in the sea. And plus, I don't know, animals in the sea usually don't kill human endeavors.
Not ships.
Ships don't sink because, sharks bite them. They sink because they're not built well.
Oh, I know. It's because all your guys run to the side to look at the shark, so therefore it tips over.
Whoops.
How long will you be around with Civ 4? Artichoker says that now that Civ 5 will be coming out at the end of the year, it's time to take a temperature on Civ 4 and its remaining time in the gaming community, quote-unquote. Let me just say, as a prime example within the Civ community of a Civ game that is managing to stand the test of successors, Civilization 2. So, remaining time in the gaming community, it's kind of like, okay, once Civ 5 is out, then Civ 4 is going to die. It's going to scale back, but it's not going to die. It's kind of like, I know there's TiVo out there now, but there's still some people that use VHS.
Who?
Me.
People that have collections of movies that are on VHS.
Now, I do buy DVDs, and I still have VHS, to tape programs off TV. So,
Yeah.
in the poll, how long will you be playing Civ 4? Less than 3 months, 3 to 6, 6 to 12, 1 to 2 years, 2 to 5 years, more than 5 years. Perhaps how long do you think you will be playing a Civ 4 after Civ 5 is released? Because, who the heck knows, right? But right now, 6 to 12 months is in the lead, closely followed by 1 to 2 years. Based on the context, they meant after Civ 5 came out, even though the question does say how long will you be playing Civ 4?
There was one poster who said, for example, Jay Fleem, Jfleme, assuming that Civ 5 comes out this fall, I answered 6 to 12 months for now. So at least one person interpreted it differently.
There was one person in that thread who said that, I'm going to be playing Civ 4 till Civ 6 comes out because I don't like what I'm hearing about Civ 5. Whoa!
Owned. I like Troy the Face's post. Fact, I'll buy the day it comes out. Fact, I'll complain about things and say they should have done this or that like some uptight gaming brat. Then complain about when the next patch is coming and then write all kinds of crap when someone writes something I disagree with. I'll write condescending smart aleck retards. That's probably one of his best accuracy posts ever.
I expect I will be playing Civ 4 and kind of put it in every once in a while for years. And I still play Alpha Centauri, which is what I played before Civ 4. I can't say. It depends on how much I like the Civ 5, and are there people still online that I like to play with that I play Civ 4, since I'm actually most of the time play it online now rather than in single-player games.
Yeah, same here. If past is a good predictor of future behavior, then for you, I'd expect that you would be playing Civ 4 maybe even a decade now, still. I think back to, in terms of my transitioning from one Civ title to the other, I go back from the beginning, going from Civ 1 to Civ 2. Well, when Civ 2 came out, I didn't know Civ 2 came out. I didn't have internet access then. It's just being in a store, and there's Civ 2? Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So I was able to play it right away, and then that was the end of Civ 1. Civ 2 to Civ 3. When Civ 3 came out, my computer couldn't handle it, so I continued to play Civ 2, and then I went to Civ 3, didn't go back to Civ 2. As far as Civ 3 to Civ 4, again, it was kind of, my computer cannot handle Civ 4, so I'm going to be sticking with Civ 3. And by the time I actually played Civ 4, it was right after Warlords had come out, so it was almost a year after Civ 4's release, and then I could not install Civ 3 from my computer fast enough. So... delete. There's kind of different factors from each one of those transitions from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and then 3 to 4. I'm going to predict that I will play Civ 5, but I will not only play Civ 5 and not Civ 4, maybe at least until a patch or two comes out. And since we know Civ 5 is going to be quite a departure still from Civ 4, I expect that while I'm on the learning curve for Civ 5 and I'm getting my butt whooped until I understand the system, I'll be going back to Civ 4 for some comfort, and then I'll eventually wean myself off.
I think that when Civ 5 comes out, I'll probably switch immediately. I'm kind of ready for a new version. I think it's been long enough.
I will probably switch close to immediately, but I have other factors leading me to do that.
I think it depends on how much you play as well. I don't play as much as some of y'all do, just because I don't have the time to, especially single-player games.
To me, it kind of comes down to two things. If they screw up the replayability, the variety of games, or if there's broken gameplay that they don't fix fast enough. Either of those two things is probably what's going to get me bored or not playing it, but I'm going to get it right away, so that's not really a question. But if it's broken or something, that's when I might switch back to Civ 4 or go to StarCraft or something like that.
Oh yeah, StarCraft 2's coming out soon too. Go back to my RTS roots.
People overseas sometimes have a really crappy exchange rate, or maybe they're not in a cash economy, so the game might be the equivalent of a month's work. So those are the kind of people that wait for a while, I think, especially until it's either cracked or it gets to the bargain bin wherever they live in whatever country.
to the Senate, where we discuss game strategy.
The third title is Do You Build Monasteries, started by Wooby, I think it's Wooby. They give 10% science and the ability to build missionaries. They also crap out at scientific method, I believe. That's correct, they do. They obsolete then. Everything but culture stops at scientific method for them. Obviously, whenever I have wonder for religion, I have a monastery and city pumping up missionaries to get my 1 gold return. However, I rarely build them otherwise, sometimes not even in my science cities. I just find I usually have better things to build, and I don't like the fact that they're useless before long. And the thread has addressed this since the original post, and I also disagree with the original post. As I think it was Costin pointed out, they have the same hammer to research multiplier percentage returns as observatories, and they're available much earlier, and they give you culture. And sometimes the culture is not irrelevant, and sometimes the access to the missionaries isn't irrelevant. If you do have the religious buildings, or somebody built the apostolic palace in that religion, then they become even stronger. And there'll actually be a priority build after either the granary or library, whatever. If you're getting multiple things, like you have Sancor and Spiral, or Sancor and Apostolic Palace, or something like that, they probably are your best economic building after the granary. So they are a situational build, but in science cities, they are a consistently solid option prior to scientific method. And until you're getting really close to it, I would definitely consider building them.
You can also pop great scientists for that too. But another thing to consider when you're building monasteries is how many religions you have. Because, if you have just one religion and you don't have Sancor or the Spiral Minaret, then if you have like 3 or 4 religions or more, you can build a bunch of monasteries and you'll get a huge increase in science. And it makes for a good science city if you do that.
It's usually a good investment in a bureaucracy capital. I can't think of too many exceptions to that.
If I need the culture, and if I don't have anything else, then I can build them. But I always switch to organized religion, and I just pump out monasteries everywhere without having to build one. And that always seems to be, to me at least, a better strategy. Unless I need the culture, or unless I'm have some wonders.
Once you have alphabet or currency, you can just build wealth or research, and in some cities that'll be a better return than anything you can build. And then there's always the option for units, too. People tend to underbuild both of those things, so those are things to keep in mind as well.
If you're talking about your science cities, of course, with the 10%, unless you are in a situation where you have the Apostolic Palace religion in there and you're getting hammers out of it, if that's the case, as most of the people who are on this call know, I absolutely love to do that.
Yes.
Let's just assume for a moment that you don't have that for whatever reason. Sad face. Then the plus 10%, if you're looking at a city that's giving you like 5 or 6 speakers a turn, and you're looking at another city that's giving you 40 or 50, those 40 or 50 are your science cities. So it makes sense to be building a monastery in those cities, and then as far as it becoming obsolete at scientific method, well, you should be building them sooner rather than later so you get the benefit out of that. I definitely don't. I mean, the opening poster talks about being able to actually build missionaries with it. I switched to organized religion, as was already mentioned, be able to do that, to build missionaries without that. I don't view that as a priority. And not even the culture so much necessarily. Maybe some border cities where it's getting squeezed and I feel like, oh man, this is needed in order for that to not be absolutely ridiculous. But really, it's the science benefit primarily that I'm looking at. Always in the capital, whether I'm running bureaucracy or not, but I actually do almost always run bureaucracy at some point in the game, which is contrary to what I said a couple of years ago. But anyway, any other high science production cities, regardless of the Apostolic Palace, so that's the first tier. And the second tier is, if it's an Apostolic Palace religion, and I can get that religion into the city, then as Phil said, after granary, courthouse, it becomes a priority build.
Sometimes even before the courthouse.
If we're talking about specialized research cities or science cities, hammers are at a premium. It's not like you've got infinite hammers, so you've got to make a choice between working mines or whatever and working your towns or running specialists. So it comes down to there's better things you want to do, monastery or theater, which is going to let me work another town. When it comes down to that, simply do the math, and to me, it's just not a good build because it's going to expire. I'd rather have the theater, go ahead and invest those hammers and keep working and maturing my cottages up to towns.
Well, when you have a bureaucracy capital, though, you can get it pretty close to all 20 tiles by the early ADs. I'm talking like maybe pop 15 by 200 AD or so. It's reasonable if you have hereditary rule. And at that point, you're probably working all your viable tiles for cottages already, and a couple mines on top of it. So in that city, you're deciding between a theater, which will raise your happy cap 1, but you either have units for that or maybe resources. You also have to consider health buildings, so you're not running into that kind of problem. But when you have a power city like that, it could easily be worth 100, 200 beakers, the vast majority of the research in your empire, where building a monastery for whatever hammer cost it is, I forget offhand, is worth 10 to 20 beakers a turn for a good portion of the game. I mean, that easily has a good return on its investment. You'll get that paid back pretty quickly compared to most of your other options. And after your library academy, it is your only other science building for quite some time. So if you're trading for gold from the AIs or selling text for gold, and you're able to keep a high slider consistently, it could easily outstrip your other building options. It might even be better than building wealth in that case.
Right, but you're talking about the capital.
Yeah, this is not a building that you would spam all over the place unless you have wonders that boost it. But for certain cities, it is very strong for its research benefits that it confers.
From the cultural aspect that you're mentioning there, Wodan, yeah. I mean, I would definitely prioritize the theater first, getting +3 culture instead of +2. I realize it's 50 hammers, it's 10 less. If I don't quite have drama yet, and I feel I need that culture, then I will use the monastery for the culture purpose. But after monuments, once theater comes about, since monuments are going to expire anyway, absolutely, especially your newer cities, whether it's your later settled cities or, okay, I've taken over this city and now, this culture around is going to be a bit of a problem. What am I going to do to try to get that land and hold it?
When I said theater, I was talking about for the happiness, not the culture.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that.
No, that's all right.
Theaters also have their own set of benefits in that they unlock a national wonder that could vary from not so helpful to very helpful depending on what you're doing with it. And the ability to run your culture slider for more happiness can matter, and it can potentially be very useful depending on what you're doing.
We last discussed this on episode 12 with the 12 guest co-hosts, as a matter of fact, but this was before...
Oh, we should have gotten 93 co-hosts for this one. Yeah.
We're saving that for 100.
Oh, awesome.
That would be awesome.
In a way, that would be nice, just not all at the same time. I wanted to bring this issue up again, mostly, but not exclusively, mostly because when we talked about it 3 years ago, Beyond the Sword had not yet been released, so there was no Apostolic Palace consideration.
I hadn't even started playing CivIV yet 3 years ago.
Do you have to depress me even more?
Aww. Well, that's the purpose of PolyCast, to cheer Dan up, right?
There you go.
Analyze imperialistic. This individual would like to know what other people think in terms of the best trait to combine with imperialistic. And I've never seen a strategy discussion for this. I think you can get maybe a tendency, more likely than not. I don't think you can necessarily ever get an absolute sort of thing because there's a lot of things we discuss on this show can be very game situational. But he goes through each one of the options, looking at unique units, unique buildings, leader traits, specifically that have it in terms of how they generally play themselves out in the games. Don't believe he himself says in his post which one he thinks it is, and the poll that goes with it is not public in terms of who voted for what. But right now, with nearing twice as many votes as any other, is organized, followed closely by financial, expansive, and creative. So just so we are clear here on imperialistic traits, create general emergence, increase 100% and 50% faster production of settlers.
New trait from Warlords. If you could mix it with expansive, it would boost everything else that it also boosts even more. That might be to give you other problems.
I'd be tempted to say expansive or organized, and well, you pair anything with financial.
Financial changes gameplay so much, though. But yeah, the top 3 traits that won in the votes here, I kind of agree with them. When you have organized, that's Julius Caesar. So a lot of people are probably just picking that for the Praetorians and their ability to pay for their conquest with Praetorians. But he's actually a solid expanding leader, even if you're not using your military to expand. That's just rarely showcased because he's usually leading Rome. But it does help to be able to pay for rapid expansion. Obviously, financial will help with that too. Less need to shift more citizens working on the cottages rather than mines or farms. Expansive is probably the fastest because you get the worker bonus as well and the fast granary. So nobody sets up a city faster once it's settled than expansive. So there's some synergy there with Imperialistic. And then Creative is close behind it. I agree with that too. It's just another thing to save you hammers early on. Imperialistic Expansive is Yao of Portugal. And that's one of the few non-creative AIs that plays well. Because, like the human, he will spam cities, and on higher difficulties, he'll be able to pay for them easily. So he's actually one of the better teching AIs in the game, despite the fact that he doesn't really have any economic trait that's long-term, except for the small boost from Expansive. It doesn't matter. He still usually does well on average. Well, he also likes hereditary rule, so he grows his cities earlier.
The thing about Imperialistic is that I just don't think that the Great Generals are that great to begin with. You can settle them, but earlier in the game, Great Generals are just kind of useless because you can't build military academies yet, so...
Super medic.
Yeah, super medic, or you can, add them to the city, and then you get 2 experience points per unit or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't really see what's so great.
It can matter, though. Well, first of all, if you attach a Great General, you instantly unlock Heroic Epic, as long as you don't split it between a whole ton of units.
Oh, yeah.
So you can take your reasonably strong Hammer City with Heroic Epic, and then stack in 2 to 3 Great Generals there, and all of a sudden you're kicking out units with 10 experience or greater every other turn or every turn on normal speed. And those are effective units. So we're talking about City Raider 3 Siege, or Combat 2 Shock, or Combat 3 Knights, that kind of stuff that you can just crank out in mass. Or you could do that with naval units as well, and there's really very little that contends well with naval units with a promotion advantage. So you do have some options. It's not great, but I'd say that that's a good enough bonus on top of the early settler bonus.
I would say so too. I mean, you could go the Great Medic path, or I like to, especially when you're getting into the medieval age, settle the Great General, and then start building siege units in that city. So I can end up with a double promoted. And typically I build catapults, and they end up being City Raider 2, right from the outset. I love that.
You could use Vassalage or Theocracy for City Raider 2 Siege as well. But when you stack that with the Great Generals, say you settle 3 Great Generals, you're running Theocracy, and all of a sudden that's how you get your City Raider 3 Siege, and that can be incredible.
I went through a period after Warlords came out where I really tried to abuse Great Generals. And I did all kinds of stuff like Imperialistic, build a Great Wall, piss off the AIs, get them to attack me on my turf, and then just had Great Generals coming out the wazoo. And you can easily have multiple cities with 3 or 4 settled Great Generals, or you could turn all of them into Warlords and have these Uber units just running around, and it's a really fun game. But it's also a powerful strategy, and it's a lot different than a lot of other typical strategies that people do. There was a thread in Napolitan only a couple months ago where we discussed it. It's worth checking out if anybody's interested in trying it.
If you do go to war later, you can build the military academies, and that will help you with certain things, like building nukes, for example. If you wait to war until late in the game, the military academies do become a solid option. And you can get a lot of military academies with Imperialistic.
Something else not to forget, if you're running RAP or SE or whatever, all your settled Great Generals get you the +3 beakers, so that adds up too.
We've talked about Imperialistic, and we've talked about it with Financial for sure. Organized, yeah, I mean the minus 50% civic upkeep, and then Expansive +2 health per city, plus double production speed on Granary and Harbors.
Yeah, it's the Granary and the worker reduction that really make Expansive so strong with Imperialistic.
And we talked about Creative 2, and then what's the next one? Charismatic.
Well, it's alright.
It doesn't strike me as either...
The leader it comes on makes it incredible, just because it happens to give you immortals as well. So, there's that.
Yes, assuming you're not playing with unrestricted leaders. But yes, standard.
Yeah, standard play, you get Persia, so that's a plus. It gives you some variety in terms of the units you produce. Like, Imperialistic and Charismatic are the 2 traits that are war traits that really apply to any unit, potentially, rather than just gunpowder, just archery, just melee, that kind of stuff. So, you do have some flexibility for that. It's probably the best trait combination for running mounted units. Yeah, Charismatic does offer some economic benefits early on. I wouldn't say it's the best trait combo out there, but for rapid expansion, it can be pretty good. If you have a lot of resources, it can be awesome.
Well, it definitely has the best synergy with Imperialistic for the Great General increase. The other things like Financial, they're good in their own right. They don't really have any synergy.
Yeah, really the best for synergy would be the, like you say, Charismatic and then Expansive.
And so then at the bottom end, aggressive and spiritual are combined, and then philosophical, and then with no votes as of this recording, protective. Come on into the research lab where we explore concepts that are not in Civ yet, but maybe in the future.
Howard Mahler started a thread about having a new idea of a deep-sea fishing fleet. Now, he's proposing it as a building as opposed to actually having a resource and having to send a workboat out there. But he says that it would represent the ability to send out a deep-sea fishing fleet from the coastal city in which it was built. Presumably they're going to some way offshore fishery and coming back. And initially that would be just +1 food, coin, and hammer. But then steam power increases that to 2 of all of those, and refrigeration is 3 of all of those. Now, someone else later in the thread suggested it being putting the resource out there and getting it +1 food for everything in the Civ, but come on, we already have Sid Sushi to abuse food like that.
Sushi abuse can get ridiculous, too. I don't know what to make of this building. Like, it doesn't seem too strong. You get a lot of potential for high food cities late in the game anyway, as we just pointed out. I don't know. And I haven't run the numbers on it, how it would compare to other buildings.
It would help all those tundra cities that are locked up in the ice.
Yeah, after you spent like 50 turns to build it because you don't have any hammers.
I know.
It depends. I mean, can you just build this thing anywhere, or do you have to go where there's a deep sea fish resource or something?
It sounds like you could do it in any coastal city.
Yeah, it's any coastal city that already has a lighthouse and a harbor. The OP says without a resource, but then somebody later was suggesting a resource, but that was also the one that wanted to be +1 food for every city in your Civ per resource.
Yeah, that would get out of hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I viewed it as occasionally when you have those seafood resources and you realize, I can't actually settle for that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to get that in one of my cities. That's where I thought this would work very well.
Only tile that can access the fish happens to be a mountain. That's always fun.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
The problem is that you can still do this in your really good uber coastal cities, so it's kind of like a rich get richer, and yeah, your marginal cities can now be viable, but they still pale in comparison to your best cities, which you already have anyway.
It doesn't sound like a difference maker, though. Until steam power or refrigeration, it's kind of a marginal benefit, kind of like the Beret. It's a good building, but it doesn't really make anything ridiculously strong. It would have to actually be relatively cheap hammer-wise for me to consider it early on.
When he's saying it has tech either optics or astronomy, so you're not going to have it from particularly early on either, unless you do a later start.
Or you bulb astronomy at like 200 AD, but even then.
Yeah, I would hope that would be under optics, because you also get the whaling boats.
Yeah.
Having to wait for astronomy might be a little too late for you to even consider building them.
It almost doesn't matter, though, because they're not very good until later.
Yeah.
It's an interesting idea, but it's just hard to picture how it would work in practice.
It'd be interesting to compare it to, like initially you said, start off with the +1 food, coin, and hammer, and then the increasing it gets to upon further technology acquisition. Maybe something, instead of that just as a comparison, that tile has to be worked for X number of turns, kind of like a cottage situation.
You mean the city has to have constructed it for so long?
Yeah.
Kind of like how buildings double up in culture. This could get more strength over time. Yeah, maybe.
Sorry, I was thinking about it as a tile improvement for some reason as opposed to a building.
Yeah, if you added that effect, it would be really awkward. Like, it could be interesting. You might want to settle coastal cities sooner than you would otherwise. Huh.
Not on a lot of maps that we necessarily need an incentive to settle coastal cities more quickly, but yeah.
Well, sometimes you want to block first, and this would make you wonder if you should do that or if you should try to settle the coastal city first for this benefit. And yeah, I don't know. If you made it strong enough, you'd definitely want to settle the coastal city first. I don't know what strong enough would be. But it is an interesting idea. I do like the suggestion.
As long as it is that it can only be with a coastal city, that it would actually have a seafood resource, and then maybe you could argue that that seafood resource maybe on extended out ocean tile, seeing as how we're talking about, deep sea fishing fleet.
I don't really see a need for it. Coastal tiles are pretty okay anyway, and fish are amazing, and I don't know, you add more. As I think Phil pointed it out, there's a lot of other opportunities for having really food-rich cities later in the game, and this modification is for later in the game.
Well, I know we mentioned Sid Sushi already, but if you've got a huge sprawling empire, you may decide that the investment to put into corporations is not worth it, and you want to be still running state property. So,
Well, then you have water mills and farms available to you. Biology farms are for food. A couple of those will grow a city very quickly. Although usually if you're running state property, you do want to be working workshops ultimately. Workshops or water mills. But farms will get you up to speed pretty quickly in terms of pot numbers.
I don't know, let's have this as a national wonder you can build, and it add 50% food to the city you build it in.
Oh my god. You go to those cities with 5 seafood resources or something, you plus 50% food. Here you go, here's 12 specialists early in the game. Go ahead and get liberalism like, 1 AD and enjoy biology by like 500 AD. Why not?
Yeah. And you can whip all the time because you can build a
Slope theater, oh my god.
have no unhappiness. It ends up becoming a great worker city too, and just pump the units out.
So you see, if there's anybody listening to this episode and listening to this topic and they're not in support of it as a new building, you see, my position is if you don't support it as a new building, then it's going to be a national wonder. Now, which would you rather have? Exactly. New building. Thank you. I win. You're welcome. Goodbye. Have a good day.
You just gave us like 2 options, one of which is much worse than the other, and then you win? Like,
That strategy works more often than it should, actually.
Another Christopher Tin song for CivIV theme. Calling All Dawns was a soundtrack that Christopher Tin released last year and wrote Baba Yetu, and then also has, I think there was about 12 songs on Calling All Dawns, all in a different language, different lyrics, different approaches, and you can listen to, I think it's actually complete samples over at ChristopherTin.com. So some people have been arguing that for Civilization's 5 theme, A, it should be by Christopher Tin, and B, it should be one of the other songs that is on this album, and there's a couple of threads trying to support one or the other. The first one that's mentioned, it's quite epic enough.
It's very pretty.
This
Terrific song. The concern I have is that it's not really innovative. I think the last thing they want to do is present Civ 5 as like Civ 4 Part 2. So I see them doing something totally different.
It really is too similar.
yeah, I agree. When I was hearing the beginning of the song, I was like, isn't this in the game already? And then I realized, oh, no.
Call in today. In North America, the number is 301-637-7659.
That's 301-637-POLY.
In Europe, 44121-288-7659. That's 44121-288-POLY.
You can Skype us at the PolyCast or email us at thepolycast@gmail.com.
The only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about.
For more information on PolyCast,
Our sibling shows Modcast and Revcast.
Or about Polycast in general.
Log on to the series' official website at
Polycast.net.
thepolycast.net.
Blue shells, stars, what is this?
Mario Kart.
Mario Kart.
Oh, okay. Blah. Consoles. Blah.
Whatever.
Whoa, hey now.
I do a lot of my 360.
Civ on consoles was a mistake.
Whoa, hey now. It's a totally separate topic, and I think that's not true. That was,
Revcast might not enjoy that assertion.
You had to dumb it down for those.
oh, no.
Have you played CivRev?
No, I actually have not.
Okay.
I don't own a console. Yes.
Assertions and Ignorance. Awesome.
Yes.
Hey, Polycast episode 93, Assertions and Ignorance.
Hey, we come up
There
a
you
lot
go,
of
Dan.
titles this
That's
time.
pretty good. I like that one. Oh, that's even better than whatever the hell the other ones were.
I don't remember them either.
That'll go with our CivV conversation, I guess, as well. You know, we are all asserting ignorance here since we don't work for Civ, so that works out.
We don't work for Civ? Civ is an entity unto itself now? Whoa.
Yes! It has taken over Fraxis.
Well, first Firaxis and then 2K, huh? Well, that's alright.
Yeah.
It's gonna go for Grand Theft Auto's jugular. Well, I can see it.
The next Windows is just going to be Civ, and it will be the operating system. And then you'll be trying to use some of the other things for it. You'll be writing a paper or something, and it'll come up, pop a little bubble, and say Civ.
See, it'll be integrated into the next version of Windows so that when it thinks it's time for you to play Civ, it'll just automatically start Civ and say, you play now.
So basically, it just runs Civ right when you turn it on. It just stays on Civ no matter what.
First time, it should say that, and then there's an OK button, and then there could be a little checkbox that says, don't warn me next time, and then it loads.
That's awesome. Or make two buttons and have one say yes and the other one say OK. That would be kind of fun, too.
And if you try to click X or you try to shut down the operating system, it just formats your hard drive. There's no way you can get around it.
You will play Civ. Your new AI master decrees it.
This has been Daniel, the only important person who is on the call. William, Wodan.
Are you there?
He's fallen asleep.
And this is where you say something entertaining.
Oh, sorry about that. I was on mute.
There we
That's
go.
the
That's
entertainment.
loaded for you.
Sorry about that. I was on mute. Okay, excellent.
Yeah,
I might have to
moving on.
use that. I might have to use that.
Yeah.
There you go.
Lisa Bang, Q&L. This podcast has been brought to you by the letters Q, N, and L.
Right. Let's move on.
Tell me how to get to Polycast Street.
Mackie,
Now with 100% more smartass.
Philip, or the TheMeInTeam.
Now officially named worst person ever by the Polycast panel.
And then Dan Quick, as always, our lovely host.
Listeners, you probably skipped right to the end, didn't you? Didn't you?
Then B, Daniel Cole, the only real important person on this podcast.
We're all fake important people.
Just because you say it more than once, Daniel, does not make it so.
Oh, but it does, but it does. I mean, I have yet to win a game through culture. So, anybody who plays Civ will never touch an evil real-time game.
Hey, I came from the RTS side. Thank you very much. I was good at StarCraft.
That explains a lot, then, doesn't it?
Cat fight.
Is this sort of a dog fight?
I don't prepare well for when I'm making that switch. I think I do, but then I don't, and I end up having unhappiness everywhere as soon as I make the switch. So.
See there, you need to play faster so you can plan those things out.
Out of turn timer.
Aw, Phil, what are you doing? Stirring the pot. We got it down to a simmer and everything.
Damn, real-time strategy, people.
Oh, man. So maybe on that note, we'll switch to a topic that doesn't inflate Phil's ego.
There is such a topic.
I don't understand how that's possible, but okay, let's try.
This has been Daniel, the only important person who is on the call. Lisa Bang, Makahlua, TheMeInTeam, otherwise known as Philip Bellew.
You see, you're supposed to do like an interim pause so we can say funny things.
Yeah.
And, obviously, you're going to edit that out. Okay.
Blooper reel.
Very quickly just giving you stuff for DanQ to do. Like, yes, you're going to edit that out. You're going to edit this out. Yes, you're going to edit that out and this too. All right?
I see blue squiggles.
Don't want to have his cell phone number on the podcast.
Maybe he does. Maybe he does.
Record date April 24th, 2010. Madokara Mairu and Kiyohara Demarino clips copyright Christopher Tin. Civilization 4, Warlords and Beyond the Sword sound clips copyright Take-Two Interactive. Copyright Civilized Communication at civcom.net.